Well, hey guys, I'm glad that you are on today, and we are looking forward to a great day today. I um I had a task. I asked to do this. I wanted to call all the guys in our charter membership, and I started that, and I got through one. I got through one call because it lasted a long time. So it's going to take me a long time to do this. So we're going to have your charter memberships that are going to be about 5 years long. We need you to stay with us that long so that we can get through a personal call. But we do appreciate you guys. And honestly, we think about you guys. We pray over you and your ministries. We have a list of all those of you on our charter membership. And because of you, we're able to do the things that we're able to do in Idea Network. So thank you. I know it's a great investment. And I think God's going to use this investment to help a lot of church planners and missionaries. And so we're a part of something bigger than ourselves, and that's exciting. It's good to see Rob Redland today. Rob is one of the older fellas in the charter membership here and on our team, and we appreciate him greatly. I know a lot about Rob. Just recently, I hired Rob's son, and so I know all kinds of things about Rob that he doesn't want anybody to know. And Rob's son's doing a great job in our children's ministry here. So Rob, thank you for all that you do for the network. And why don't you pray, ask the Lord's blessing here on our time together today.
Father, we are so grateful for the fellowship that you have designed through a body of believers. And Lord, I ask that you would just bless our time together today, use it to further your kingdom and to help us become more like you. So bless this time, we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Hello, everyone. So excited to see you again. I don't know why, but this week feels like it's been a lot longer than a week, 7 days. I do want to kind of reintroduce you to a very good friend of mine, Courtney Winters. She's also the operations assistant for Idea Network. I wanted to kind of reintroduce you to her today because she's actually going to be running the roundtable next Tuesday. I will be at an ABWE conference in Pennsylvania, and there's a lot of activities during the time that we normally meet. So this will be the first Tuesday that I will not be with the roundtable since we started the membership program. So, but Courtney's going to do a great job, and I look forward to you guys getting to know her a little bit more. So, hi, Courtney. So announcements this week. So we're at the end of October already. I kind of want to cry because I feel like, oh my goodness, this year is like going so fast. But also this month has gone so fast. So we have a challenge this month that we put out for the charter members and even the sponsored members to read through the Gospels in their entirety and take notes on how Jesus Christ set up the disciples for longevity in ministry. Naturally, he knew he was going to be moving on, leaving the disciples behind. How did he set them up for longevity in ministry? And really, the only to enter into this challenge is just to submit those notes, or on Friday, the 29th, this week, we'll put out the monthly check-in for the challenge and just comment there that you participated, and then we'll draw from those names. And the prize for this month is one free night at the Hilton Palacio del Rio at the San Antonio Riverwalk for the Members Idea Day event, for the members only Idea Day event in January. So that is a $200 value prize for this challenge. So we're really looking forward to that event naturally. And just a lot of you mentioned on the connection card that you maybe haven't registered yet, but you are planning on coming. So I would encourage you, it's free for you to register. It is free event for all the charter members. So a lot of you mentioned you're planning on coming. Go ahead and register so that we have that record of you coming. The +1 ticket is for the sponsored member as well as a +1. So if your sponsored member is coming, you can also bring a +1. So if that's your spouse, if that's another pastor friend, another ministry leader in your staff that you want to join you for this event, they can sign up using that +1 ticket. We do ask that you bring 1 + 1, not multiple. We do want to make this a smaller charter members event so that it doesn't grow to be massive. Maybe in the future that will change, but for this event, we're sticking to that +1 for that purpose. So go ahead and register and let us know that you're coming so we can plan for that. We have a lot of things in place. I've already started sourcing everything for your guys' 2022 merch box. I think you'll be very pleased with what is coming in that. Of course, that's bonus. It's all just extra, but it's really fun. So greatly looking forward to that and everything we have coming up for November, which we'll share a little bit later. Pastor Josh is going to come and introduce our speaker.
Hey guys, so glad you're here. First of all, I want to begin with an apology. As you can tell, I'm starting to grow out a little bit of scruff here. And if I had known years ago how good I would look with this kind of beard, I would have started this years ago. So an apology to all of you and the world. I've got to begin an apology tour. This is, it's fantastic. Every time I look in the mirror, I can't look away. It's a problem. I've noticed that Rob Redlin is starting to look like his assistant, Aaron Schockel. That's a transition we did not expect. So we are glad. By the way, who is not following James Clydence on Instagram right now? James, raise your hand, James, for those of you. His Instagram are hilarious. And he has, James, can you unmute yourself for a second? James,
yes, I can.
How many millions and millions of followers do you have?
Oh, not millions. We got
a lot.
Amanda and I have 285 on TikTok and 76,000 on Instagram.
285,000 and thousands. Anyway, you say why? Because they do a lot of funny husband-wife videos, which are hilarious and they're a lot of fun. You got to follow him if you don't. He's a member of the network, as you can tell. And you're always wearing the hat on the thing. And I'm like,
I got to represent.
Representing the network on his our social media hero here. James, thanks for doing that. But guys, go give him a follow. You're going to have a great time with that. If you have not downloaded today's podcast, remember the podcast Idea Talks comes out every Tuesday. And Robbie Green has a episode on there today. It's entitled, I didn't want to get it wrong, Essentials in Mentorship with Robbie Green. Great episode. Go down and download it. And then last week's episode it's called Motivated for 2022, 5 things you should be doing right now in preparation for January's kickoff of the new year. Great episode, and want to get you to download those and check it out. And speaking of the next year, Kurt Skelly, what I love about this entire month has been a focus on long-term ministry, longevity in ministry, not leaving, not losing, not ending too quickly. And one of the great ways in which we can have longevity in ministry is an optimistic outlook on the future. If you're like me, I talk to a lot of our church members who are especially of a certain age, and man, it is so discouraging how they view the world right now, what's going on with the United States. And I get it. It's not easy to see what's going on in this world. And sometimes you can get to the place where he's like, the best, it was back there. The best is not yet to come. But one of the things that my father's taught me that is, if I'm going to be in this for the decades and not for the years, I need to have a positive outlook on the future. And today we have one of the most positive, encouraging men that I've ever come across in ministry. My friend Kurt Skelly is going to come and talk about how important it is to have longevity in ministry, and specifically, the best is yet to come. Kurt, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, it's so good to be with the Idea Day Network. And guys, thanks for taking some time this afternoon for me. I don't know how many fellow East Coasters I have on the talk today, but it's about a little bit after 2 here, East Coast, and appreciate you letting me come on. You know, I thought about this topic, Josh, when you asked me to come a couple months ago about just the best is yet to come. There was a strategic time in my ministry, and I am a positive guy. I really feel like I do see the glass half full. I do have a sense of humor. I feel like, there's always something great around the corner. I've just always been that way. I think that's maybe more of a personality disposition than a spiritual gift, but it's true. But I will say this, after pastoring for 25 years, 20 years in one place, I reached a place in my ministry where I really didn't think, as far as pastoral ministry was concerned, I really didn't think that the best was yet to come. I thought God had something for me. I didn't know what the Lord was doing in my life. But when it came to pastoring, I really kind of was done. And I've not said that to a whole lot of people out loud. But the truth of the matter is that that's where I was. And I think the reason for that is because I had reached the end of all that I could do. And what I mean by that was I think I really was in a place of ministry, and the bottom line is it was pride, a place in ministry where I was trying to be everybody's everything. And by trying to be everybody's everything, I really was becoming nobody's anything. I was spreading myself a mile wide. I felt like I was an inch deep. I felt that I wasn't effective in any of the relationships of my life. I felt like I was a sorry husband, a bad dad, a mediocre pastor. I felt that I was a friend that wasn't there when I needed to be. I just felt like any view that I took of my life, I was dissatisfied with who I was, and I just knew intuitively that this was not healthy, and this was not something that Jesus would want. And I erroneously thought that the reason for that was pastoring. I just need to get away from pastoring. I'll travel, I'll do the evangelism thing, I'll help some other people, I'll go into some other segue in ministry. But obviously, pastoring, I've reached the end of what I can do. But I was so wrong. There were some big philosophical changes that needed to take place in my heart, in my mind, that I wasn't even aware of yet. So I resigned at Harvest Baptist Church. I believe that the Lord had led me to do that for some of the reasons I'm talking about right now and some others. Healthy church, no problems, but it was just the Lord's leading. And so in June of 2016, I took 6 months. I thought it would be 6 years. I thought it would be the rest of my life, honestly. And I just began to travel, began to preach, and I was at some of your churches. And I began to just read and think. Matter of fact, my former youth pastor, Tim Delaney, said, "Hey, Pastor, what are you doing with all your time right now?" And I'll never forget what I told him. I said, "Tim, I think. I just spend some time. I just think. I meditate." And I know that sounds weird, but I just really didn't have that time during those last years of my pastorate. Well, make a long story short, the Lord called me to Faith Baptist Church in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And it was clear that God led me here, and I fought it. I really didn't want to come. I felt like the Lord led me to come. And the analogy I used with some of my closer friends was I felt that I was on deployment. It's like I'm going to Afghanistan. I know that I have these orders from headquarters. I know I'm supposed to go, but I can't wait until my deployment is over and I can get out of this thing. So I was coming to Virginia. I had one last meeting to do, and it was in Australia, of all places. So I was in Sydney, Australia for 3 weeks. And for 3 weeks, I was hosted by one of my best friends in the world, a man by the name of Mansour Youssef. And Mansour is a very, very successful businessman. At that point, he's now the pastor of that church, but at that point, he was the president of a company called Maincom, and very, very successful, very, very well off financially. And he hosted me for those 3 weeks, and we would tool around in his Porsche SUV or his BMW little sports car and eat fine food and just talk and laugh. And it was just kind of like a vacation for me. At the end of those 3 weeks, I looked over at him. He was driving the car, and I looked over at him and I said, "Mance," I said, "let me ask you a question." He said, "Sure." I said, "How many hours a week do you work?" And he looked at me with kind of this piercing look and pause. And he said, "1." And I looked back at him. I said, 1 hour? How do you get away with that? And I'll never forget what he did. He looked at me and he said, Kurt, I've been waiting for you to ask me that question. Well, now he has my undivided attention. We went to a coffee shop, and for the next 4 hours, he taught me what I now believe saved my ministry, saved my ability to continue pastoring. He gave me one word that day, and for 4 hours, he talked about one word. And the one word he gave me was the word expectations. He said, Kurt, let me tell you who you are. He said, you're one of my best friends in the world. Hey, I love you, but I'm going to tell you what's wrong with you. That faithful are the wounds of a friend. He said, Kurt, you have created your own jail cell, and the name of your jail cell is expectations. Let me explain. He said, you have for years had these high and lofty expectations for yourself. And then he gave me some examples. He said, like, you'll say things like, I only miss 2 Sundays a year, or, I never go on vacation more than 8 days, or he just gave me a bunch of examples. And he said, and Kurt, in giving those examples, he said, I don't think you're being proud. He said, but what you're telling me is that you have these high and in some cases unrealistic expectations for yourself that you live by. He talked about some things I did at the church that I didn't need to do, and the schedule that I would keep, and just the craziness of my life. He described it in detail. And he said, Kurt, here's what happened. At first, when you went to Harvest Baptist, you communicated both verbally and non-verbally these expectations you have for yourself, and people were wowed by it. They were like, wow, we have a pastor that works hard, and we have a pastor that, wow. He said, but after a while, every wow goes away. And there comes a subtle time when the unrealistic expectations that you have for yourself, now unwittingly, you've given those expectations to your people. Now they have those expectations for you. And you are now living in the jail cell of the expectations, and you built the jail. And you put yourself in the jail, and then you gave the keys away to somebody else. And I said, Mance, you are describing my life. He said, I know, I've been watching. He said, so let me give you some advice about the way forward. The best is yet to come. The good is in the future. I believe all that. But none of that would have been true had I not heard what he said after what I just told you. So here's what he said. He said, Kurt, when you go to Faith Baptist Church in Fredericksburg, Virginia, he said, the very first thing you need to do before you ever even arrive there, and I was days away from going, he said, you need to get alone with God, and you need to figure out what are the things in life. And I want all you guys to hear this, because you need to do this as well. What are the things in life and ministry that only you can do? What are the things that only you can, no one else, you can't give them to somebody else, only you can do them. Okay, so when it comes to my personal life, obviously only I can be the husband of Wanda. Only I can be the father of Nathaniel and Joshua and Caleb and Hannah. Only I can be the grandfather of, so I had to think through my relationships. But his big challenge was not your relationships, because I think most of us get that. He said, your big challenge is, Kurt, who are you in ministry? Now, I think this is going to differ for all of us because we have different gifts, we have different opportunities, we have different churches, we have different callings. We're different, okay? But I think this will help. So for me, I had to determine what are the 3 big things that define what only I can do at Faith Baptist Church. Here's what I came up with. Number 1, only I can be the primary spokesman for the church. Primary. That doesn't mean I do all the preaching and teaching, but I primarily, I'm the one that covers the lion's share of the teaching and preaching. Only I can do that. I'm called to do that. That's my job as the pastor teacher at Faith Baptist Church. It's not that others don't teach. It's not that others don't lead. They do, but I am the primary teacher preacher. I have to understand that. Number two, I am the one that invests in the leadership. Somebody has to lead the leaders. Someone has to be the one that steers the team. Someone has to be the one that guides that group think. And so I have to be the one that invests in the leadership. And then the third thing I came up with was this. Somebody has to be the curator of God's vision for this church. Now, it's not my vision. I'm not the visionary. My job is to spend extra time alone with the Lord. My time is to be in touch with him. My job is to ascertain and be the curator of the vision of God for this church. Those are the three things: teach and preach, invest in leaders, and then be the curator of God's vision. You say, well, Kurt, don't you visit hospitals? Not really. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't. And I'm not saying there wasn't a season in my ministry where that wasn't one of my big three. Now, it's not to say I don't care for people or write notes or do birthday cards or visit people in the hospital or stop by a shut-in. I do all those things because I'm a Christian and I love people. But when it comes to my ministry obligatory responsibility, I teach and preach. I lead the leaders, and I am the curator of God's vision. So what does that mean? That means that I have to understand, and this was key for me, because I want you to understand, guys, at my core, I'm a people pleaser. It's a besetting sin of mine. I so desperately want people to like me. I want people to approve of me. And when you're a people pleaser, you very easily get back into unrealistic expectation mode. And so I had to learn the definition of one key word in my life. Okay. And the one key word that I had to learn was the word delegation. Now, don't tune me out, because I had heard all kinds of things about delegation. I had talked to all kinds of people about delegation. And quite honestly, I had taught lessons about delegation. I felt like I was a decent administrator. I felt like in a large church setting with a number of staff members, we have 80 staff members here. I felt like, man, I'm a delegator. I know what I'm doing. But you know what the fact is? I had no clue until I understood this definition. This definition unlocked the whole term for me. Ready? Delegation. Delegation. Give away everything that anybody else can do. Now, I know that when I first say that, it sounds like, what? Yeah, give away everything that anybody else can do, so that the only things left in your life are the things that only you can do. And what's going to happen initially is you're going to have all of this extra time that will easily get filled up in very good ways by the things that you're already doing, but now you're doing that much better. Delegation, giving away everything that anybody else can do. Now, here's what I used to think. I used to think that delegation was, okay, do everything I can possibly do. Live by the Franklin Covey planner system, schedule every moment of my day, be on top of everything, have my finger on everything, have my hand in every jar, know everything that's going on. And at the end of the day, when I can't get everything done, then give away all the things that I couldn't get to. That is not delegation. Let me tell you what that is. That's insanity. And what that does is that forces you, by definition, always to live at the edge of your margin. You'll never have margin because there's always more than what you can do. Remember what Jesus said? He said to Judas and to the others in the room there at Simon the leper's house in Mark 14, he said, the poor ye have with you always, but me ye have not always. What was Jesus saying? Jesus was saying, listen, there's always going to be another person to help. There's always going to be another thing to do. There's always going to be another task to perform. You're never going to get to everything. So because you're not going to get to everything, you better figure out what the thing is that only you can do. And only you can walk with God as you, only you can. And so Jesus said, put me first, and then I, by my spirit, will help you to achieve the things that you're supposed to do. So I was living in that false definition of delegation. And let me give you some reasons why. I jotted them down. When I live by a wrong definition of delegation, here's what happens. I'm constantly frustrated. Why? Because I'll never be able to do it all. Number two, I live in guilt because inevitably I'm going to give away things that I should have done. And I'm going to be doing things that I shouldn't have done. So I'm guilty about things I'm doing that are superfluous. And I'm guilty about the things I'm not doing that I should be doing. I'm living in frustration. I'm living in guilt. I'm living in resentment. Because now people that are doing the things that I'm supposed to be doing, people that are accomplishing the things that God has put in my heart, I'm beginning to resent them for doing what I could not do because I'm doing the things I should not do. And number four, I'm living in desperation because I'm always at the edge of that margin. I'm always at the edge of it. So in order for me to really believe that the best was yet to come, I had to understand the word expectations. And then I had to understand the word delegation. And then I had to live by it. And think about it. When we truly understand the definition of delegation, the proper definition, give away everything that anybody else can do. Really, what are we doing? We're living by the biblical definition of discipleship. We're constantly training and giving away. We're constantly training and giving away. Now, why don't we? Why don't we live that way? Okay, here's why. Here's why I didn't. Okay, number one, pride. Okay, because nobody can do it as good as I can do it. Nobody does that task as well as I do. Nobody, and I know I wouldn't say that out loud, but that's what I was saying. So my unwillingness to delegate was really just an idol I had created, and that was the idol of productivity. Look at how much I can do. It was pride. Not only was it pride, I think number two, it was selfishness. I like to do this. I used to direct the school play every year. It would take me 20 hours a week during play season to do that. Why did I do that? Because I like to do it. And I loved the adrenaline rush when people would say, oh, that was awesome. That was so good. But I shouldn't have been doing it. I coached a bunch of the ball teams when I probably shouldn't have. Selfishness, pride. How about this? Laziness. You say lazy? You were so busy. No, I was lazy because I was busy reacting to all the things I had to do, but I was lazy in that I was not proactively teaching other people to do those things. Understand that delegation in the short run takes more time, not less time. Some of you have small children at home. It takes more time for you to help teach them how to pick up their toys. Come on, guys, let's clean up. And you're helping them carry it over to the toy box. You're helping them to know how to fold their sheet on their bed. Yeah, it would just be a whole lot easier if you would just clean their room. It'd take 5 minutes. If you would just make the bed for them, it'd be so much easier. Yeah, in the short term, and so much more difficult in the long term. And really, when it comes to an absence of delegation in our ministries, not only do we cripple our ministries, but we cripple ourselves because we're unwilling, we're too lazy to invest in delegation in the short term. And then number four, the fourth reason why I didn't delegate was I misunderstood ministry. I looked at ministry as results. I can get better results now if I'll just do it. I can get better results now, get better excellence now if I'll just do all this stuff. Not realizing that the messiness of people work was really where it was at. I was reminded of a conversation I had with Steve Chappell. Steve said, you know, Kurt, I was considering doing a third service. They have such a great church there in Oceanside, California. We wanted to launch a third service. So I went to this guy over there. He does the Catalyst Conference, the Mariners guy. I forget what his name is. He's retired now, but Steve got an appointment with him, 4-hour appointment. And he went in, he said, okay, question number one, how do I start a third service for my church? And the man looked at Steve and said, well, why do you want to start a third service? And Steve thought, well, what kind of crazy question is that? He said, I want to start a third service because I want to reach more people. And the guy said, wrong, 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 right? Wrong. And Steve's like, what? Wrong. I mean, what's wrong about wanting to reach more people? The guy said, you don't start ministries to reach more people. Jesus builds his church. No, if you're going to start a third service, you're starting a third service because there are people whom you already pastor who need to exercise their spiritual gifts. So you don't want people from service A and service B to work service C. No, you want new ushers and new greeters and new sound men and new worship leaders and you want to give people a place to serve. If you'll do your job and task people in a delegatory way, biblically, God will grow his church. And it was such an aha moment for Steve and such an instructive moment for me when he told me all about it. Okay, so I think I'm out of time, but let me give you just some random thoughts that I had based upon this expectations and this delegation conversation that I had with Mansoor. Okay, some practical thoughts. When it came to how did I then enculturate this with our church here at Faith? You know, how do you go to a new church and say, hey, here's what I'm going to do, and here's what I'm not going to do. Here's who I am. Here's who I'm not. Because until your confidence in your ministry identity exceeds your desire to please people, you'll never be productive. Until your confidence in your ministry identity, this is not up for negotiation. This is who I am. This is what I'm going to do. Until that confidence supersedes your desire to please people, you will always remain crippled in ministry. Okay, so here were some practical things I did. Okay, I'm just going to list them. Number one, I taught myself that every yes is also a no. And so before I say yes to something, I want to consciously envision, what am I saying no to? That was so helpful to me. Before I say yes, I want to stop for a moment and think, what does this yes, what's the corresponding no? Okay, yes, I'll go preach at this meeting, but that means I'm saying no to this event, no to this time, no to this person, no to, what am I saying no to? Okay, number two, practically, I communicated all of this publicly. I said to our church family, listen, let me explain who I am. Let me explain how I view myself staying here long-term. And I explained all of this. I said, as a larger church, you can't look at me as the pastor. You can't do that. I am not the pastor. I am a pastor. And until you look at our pastoral team in aggregate as the pastor, I think a smaller church, there's no such thing as a small church. I get that. But semantically, a church with fewer people, maybe that one pastor can be all those things. But in a larger church, I have the prerogative to say, these are the things I do. Well, I don't do much of the counseling. I don't do much of the visitation. I certainly don't oversee the nursery or the children or the teenagers or the school or the college. Other people do that much more effectively than I do. And so I want to communicate to people who does what so that they're not guessing. Number three, I want to be willing to deal with passive aggressive people. Because people in your ministry will be passive aggressive. Pastor, I guess you're not available. I guess you're not. Oh, you're out of town, or you deal with passive aggressive people by, first of all, not being passive aggressive yourself, not taking it personally, but saying to passive aggressive people, hey, listen, I'd love to get together with you. I've got this, and this. Give passive aggressive people options and then rest in what you can do and don't lament what you can't do. Number four, outsource whatever you can. I think increasingly our ministries need to understand that statement. Outsource whatever you can. Let paraministries do what they can do. They come alongside the churches in wonderful ways. Let them help you. Okay. At our church, we do very little counseling. We're not licensed professional counselors. We love the Bible. We try to help people biblically, but we outsource most of our counseling. I think it's a wise thing. Again, it's a preference, but it's helped us. Number 5, praise the absentee members of your church staff, of your leadership team. Always speak well of, glowingly of the people that are in unseen positions. I'm always bragging about the people that do our visiting and the people that do our counseling, the people that do the less upfront work. Why? Because not only am I acknowledging them publicly, but I'm also admitting, hey, I can't be all things to all men, and I can't be everybody's everything. And then lastly, let the people to whom you delegate, let them make decisions. Let them decide. See, at first, when I began to delegate, here's what I would do. I would say, hey, listen, your idea, it's your ministry, but hey, listen, just keep me posted. Give me some FYIs and at least let me have, say so. Let me approve of it. You know what I found out? That by making me the person that had to approve everything, I hadn't delegated anything. All I did was make myself the pinch point in the salad bar. You can have 5 lines at the salad bar, but if you put the salad dressing at the end of the table, it doesn't make a difference. The line's going to get really, really slow because everybody has to get the salad dressing. I was the salad dressing at the end of the line. And I was, by needing my approval, I really wasn't being a delegator at all. I was still micromanaging, just not at the front end, at the back end. So I don't know. I know a lot of that's random. I know it probably doesn't apply to everybody, but those were some things that helped me at a strategic time in my ministry at the 25-year mark that has given me wind beneath my wings to keep on going and serving God in a new and vibrant way. So I hope that helps.
It helps tremendously, Kurt. We're really thankful to have you part today. Anytime that you're part of the Idea Network, it's really incredibly helpful to us. So let's go ahead and get into some questions. We've got a lot of questions. First and foremost, this comes from our pal, Tony Luizzo. Tony says, how do you deal with situations when you delegate and it turns into a mess, when people drop the ball and it falls back on you?
Well, I think all of those are learning times. And that happened to Jesus over and over again in ministry. So those debrief times when Jesus was able to emphasize to his disciples, it wasn't about the result. It was about the person. And Jesus always came back to reclaim people. Situations, even the miracles, even the sending of the 12 and the sending of the 70. In those debrief conversations, it was always about how he could help that leader develop. And think about, here'd be a good deep dive for some of you guys. Okay, I know you're reading the Gospels right now and doing some work together, but a great thing to do is look at the way by which Jesus trained the 12, and then look at the way by which the 12 exercised leadership in Acts, in the book of Acts. Okay, for instance, look at the way they dealt with the problem in Acts 6 with the widows, and look at how all of that really was what flowed out of the things that they had learned in the delegatory process from Jesus, whether it be the feeding of the 5,000, whether it be the sending of the 12, whether it be the sending of the 70. So many of those same principles are, you see, come to bear as they were willing to say no to. What were they doing in Acts 6? They were saying, hey, we're going to do the things that only we can do. But we're not going to absolve ourselves of accountability. We're still going to be in the appointing process, but we're going to let other gifted people do the things that only they can do. So all of it's amazing how that works. So Anthony, I don't know that answers the question, but I don't beat people up. We've had several kind of big gaffes here in our ministry. Like we just did trunk or treat this other night. It was great. We had a couple thousand people. It was a wonderful night. But the first couple ones we did we learned a lot. But that's it. We learned a lot. And I think individual humility is key when you're dealing with a staff member that's goofed. And sometimes what you learn in delegation is you delegated to the wrong person. And so sometimes what you learn in delegation is you made the wrong choice of people. Sometimes in delegation, you learn that you did not prepare them properly for what you didn't delegate, you dumped. I'll tell you what a really good study is. Get the book by David Allen on getting things done, and just get the one page in that book on workflow process. It's just one. It's so good because that helps you to understand personal delegation. And understanding personal delegation will really help you how better to equip people to whom you're delegating.
So let's go back to that concept of expectations. Sometimes we put that expectation on ourselves, right, Kurt? And then sometimes we come into a church and they have that expectation upon us. And so James asked the questions, how do you manage the congregation when they see you giving up these expectations and have negative feelings about it? Maybe those are negative feelings that you're feeling that they feel, or maybe they, like you said, passive aggressively or aggressively push back on those expectations. How do you deal with that personally, and how do you deal with that congregationally, especially in a church between the ages of or size of 100 to 250 people? What do you do with that?
Yeah. Okay. Plow the ground before you plant the seed. So don't just whip it on people. Plow the ground in teaching and preaching. Identify the biblical principles that underscore the things that you're going to do. Make sure that people understand philosophically and biblically, what delegation is, how sharing the load, what sharing the load looks like. Show them some preferable models that aren't your own church. Show them some preferable biblical models, and then don't go from 0 to 60 in 1 week. Don't just say, okay, now I'm no longer counseling, or now I'm no longer hospital visiting. So for instance, at Harvest, when we reached kind of like the 400 mark, I was like, I can't make all the hospital calls. I want to, I like to, but I can't. So I understood that we were going to have to delegate that. I also understood that people had the expectation that I had created, that I had to be the guy that did it. So what I did is I plowed the ground before I planted the seed. I talked about some models, and then I said, okay, I selected a man in our church who grew up there. He was an engineer in our church who actually retired early, got his MDiv at Clark Summit, came back and worked for us. And I said, hey, Dennis is now going to be our care pastor, and we're both going to do hospital calling. And what I would do is I would go with him to every first visit, and then he would do all the follow-up visits. So for a while, that was the way I stair-stepped into what was a brand new concept for our people, until finally I wasn't making those first visits. So I think if you plow the ground first by undergirding the biblical philosophy and then stair-step people in, it is possible. But you're still, and I'll say that this is important too. And understand that you're always going to have a group of people that you have to grandfather. So you're changing some things. Your church is running 100, your church is running 200. Some people that were there from day one, okay, I'm still going to be the pastor that they always had when there was 50 and 100 people. So I'm going to grandfather in some of those people. And don't be afraid of an accusation of exclusivism. So people say, well, Pastor, you're just being exclusive. Well, Jesus was exclusive. If you study the ministry of Jesus, you'll find Jesus often was exclusive. Hey, Peter, James, John, you guys come with me. You guys come. He was exclusive. But here's the statement I wrote down. Exclusivism in ministry is not a lack of love. It is the essence of how a multiplying love works. So when we are strategically exclusive, that's what God did in the Old Testament. When God set his love upon Israel, it wasn't that he loved Israel to the exclusion of the world. It was that he loved Israel exclusively so that through Israel, he could love the world. Okay. So when we are exclusive in our ministry, we're not being exclusive because, this is what we like to do. Quite honestly, I don't like being exclusive. Quite honestly, I want to do everything. I have to fight this. But when we are exclusive and strategic, and keep in mind that I'm doing this so that the church can be better served. Is our church better served if I try to be everyone's everything? Or is our church better served if I hire somebody whose only job it is to visit the sick, to love people, to be there at funerals, to be there when they have a hospital test or whatever? Who's loving them? Well, certainly the person that's there at the hospital is loving them, but you know how I'm loving them? I'm loving them as their bishop. I'm loving them as the episcopos. And what we have to understand is that, yes, it's love to hold someone's hand when they're going through a surgery, but it's also love for a growing leader to say, someone needs to hold their hand and I can't always be that person. So I'm going to make sure that people are mentored. I'm going to make sure that people have that person in their life. I'm going to love them by bishoping them. That's a tough transition to make.
I think it's fantastically said. I love the question that's a follow-up that fits well here from James Despain. He says this, he says, is it possible to over-delegate, abdicate your core responsibilities? How do you know where that line is?
Yeah, I don't know that you always do know where that line is. And I think sometimes you kind of figure out that line as you do it. The answer is absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, this is not an exact science. That's why we struggle with it. That's why we deal with angst, because certainly, and delegation, the way I've described it, is a lazy man's heaven. If you want to just delegate and just say, these are things I do, but you really don't, and you just have all this free time. No, the purpose for identifying the things that only you can do is so that the time, none of this works if you're not a diligent person. None of this works if you don't have character. But that's why the Bible says, giving all diligence, add to your faith virtue. Okay, giving all diligence, add to your virtue knowledge. So unless there is in you that passion to be all that you can be for God, then all of this necessarily just fades away. But the answer is yes, you certainly can give away what you shouldn't.
So let's talk timetable. Luke Sorensen asked this question. What did your leadership training and timeline look like when it came to be able to assign these type of tasks and leadership to your team? How long did it take to fully step away and lead from the back? That sounds like a setup question. It's not. I know, Luke, it's not lead from the back. It is lead from the front. But how long does it take? What could we look at when it comes to the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months?
Yeah, I think a lot of that depends on the size of your ministry, the connections you have with your people. The longer you've waited, the longer it will take. So that's a good rubric. The longer you waited, the longer it'll take. Like for me, it didn't take a long time at all coming to faith because I didn't have relationships. So I was able to come in and establish who I was at the beginning. And there's a part of me, the people-pleasing side of me, that wants them to know the Kurt that was in Pennsylvania, that was at every birthday party, that was at every ball game. That I want them to know that. I want them to know that's my heart. I want them to know I wish I were 20 people and could do everything. I do. And I say things like that. I wish but I can't. But coming to a new church, boy, it was much easier because I was able to set some of those objective expectations early on. If I'm in an existing church, then I'm going to have to plow that ground. I'm going to have to take that time. Sometimes bringing a godly friend in ministry to help talk through some of those things, sometimes that's a blessing. To have someone else come in and plow that ground for you. That's what Jethro did for Moses. Moses couldn't see it, but somebody that loved Moses, that had a measure of wisdom, could see it and said, Moses, I know you just described your really, really busy schedule and all the things you're doing, teaching the word of God and solving all these cases and being everybody's everything. But here's my assessment, Moses, this isn't good. That must have been a sting to Moses. For Moses to work from morning till night, all day long, helping people, and for his father-in-law to come and say, no, bad job. But he took it, didn't he? And he made those adjustments, and wow, the rest is history.
I want to throw this in there as it relates to what you just said. You might be thinking, well, who could I bring in to help me with this? And the answer is your idea network. I mean, I'm going to throw out Robbie Green, Jeremy Rands, Tommy Thompson. These are the type of guys that are at your disposal as I offer them up to bring in and talk to your leadership, talk to your deacons, talk to the church, even bring them in for
and
a Sunday.
all three of those guys have done it. All three of those guys have done it masterfully. So yeah, absolutely.
So I love that concept, and it's a practical thing. Like, this is what the network is there to do. You know, there was a question that came in from Philip, and I love how the network is working. It's being answered in the thread. And somebody said, what are some great passages where you can maybe have a 3-4 week sermon series where you can explain from the scripture and expose from the scripture this principle? And already in the comments, I've seen people say Acts chapter 6, Exodus chapter 18, which you just referenced. Are there other passages you say, you know, if you were going to do a 4-week series, here are 4 passages that could work?
Yeah, I mean, those would be my top 2. I mean, the Jethro passage is just, that's classic on delegation. Acts 6, I mean, honestly, that you could deep dive that for 2 or 3 weeks as well. I think another passage that at first glance doesn't seem like one, but is a great passage is 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 12 through really the end of the book. And the reason I say that is because Paul was writing back to a church that he was very concerned about, and they were a young church. So who's leading them? Who's leading them? Paul's gone, Silas is gone, Timothy's gone. They don't have mature older saints. Somebody's leading them. And so Paul writes back to them and says, okay, here's how you need to acknowledge your leaders. And here's how you need to value them. And here's the best thing you can do for them. And he talked about being at peace with each other, and then supporting the weak and comforting the feeble-minded, and warning the unruly. And if you'll really study that passage, what you're going to find is what the Apostle Paul was suggesting is, hey, develop lay leaders that have maturity in these various areas so that you can continue to lead in the way that God wants you to lead and not be sidetracked. Because when church members aren't at peace with each other, what suffers is the Great Commission. What suffers is the purpose of the church. And so 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 12 to the end of the chapter really helps you to understand, here's how we ought to be solving our own problems. It's not, the pastor is the great solver of problems. He's like Yoda on the hill that just says things backwards and they sound really, really wise. No, it's that the pastor has helped people to understand the word of God. And there's this great symbiosis among the lay leadership. So I think that'd be a great passage as well.
We appreciate that. There's a question that keeps coming up in some of these guys' minds, and I'd really love to throw it to Robbie Green or Jeremy Rands on this. And that relates to, okay, I'm leading a church and a school. How much time do I spend leading the school? How much time do I get my fingers in there? Robbie, could you speak to that?
Absolutely. So we have similar with Kurt, we've got a little over 90 on our team here. We have a church, a school, a daycare, a dental vision clinic, and a coffee house. And so we have a lot of different head ministries going on here. I couldn't tell you what's going on in the school right now if my life depended on it, nor do I care, nor do I want to know. But what I am investing in, like tomorrow, for example, I have a leadership retreat all day with my school administrator and my elementary principal. So the 2 key figures in the school, and we will cover everything from leadership to what tuition is going to be next year. And they've done all the work. They're just making sure. So there's big ticket things that the pastor, don't confuse delegate. Well, he doesn't know what's going on. Like, the leader still has to know the big picture. I still have to guide the ship. Mm-hmm. And so while I couldn't tell you what's going on Spirit Week and what the kids are wearing in uniforms and what company we use in uniform, I can absolutely tell you an idea of what our budget is and the big ticket things that matter. I think you invest in your leaders strategically, intentionally, and that you're investing in them, and they're giving you feedback back as to what's going on, and you're helping troubleshoot their problems. They pastor, I don't know what to do in this situation. Okay, great. Let's use this as a teaching moment. Here's the leadership principle, so that you're not just dealing with this issue today, but you've taught them how to deal with these issues in the future, even though it may have a different face on it. That's just a quick thought.
You know, I hate to rush things out, but folks, we are getting right up to the edge of our time, and we always like to keep it nice and tight in that hour spot. But man, Kurt, we loved having you. And I don't know about you fellas and ladies, but if you would love to have Kurt back, maybe in the next month or two, maybe beginning of the year in January, how many of you think that'd be a positive thing? Give me a thumbs up. All right, we'd love to have you back, Kurt, if you wouldn't mind coming back. And maybe
it's such a privilege. Honestly, I love it.
Well, we love having you, and this is great. I've got too many questions that we can't even respond to at this point, but we'll have you back and we'll discuss this maybe even further, maybe even a little bit deeper. One of the big takeaways that I'd really like to have you. Oh, Kurt, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, just say one thing, guys. Call me anytime. Call me anytime. Josh has my cell number, my email address. If you have a private question, call me anytime. I'd love to talk to you.
I love it. Thank you, Kurt, for making yourself available, not only for this, but for the one-on-one conversations. And if you haven't talked to Kurt in person, please do. He really is a gracious person. Will take time to answer those questions. And one of the big takeaways that we had from this is reaching out to one of the other leaders within the Idea Network who is leading and delegating maybe in a way that you have not yet learned. Bring them in, and have an opportunity for them to address your leadership and really sit down with you for a day or two, have some of that mentorship time. And really, I mean, to bring somebody like Jeremy Rands or Tommy Thompson in, what's that going to cost? $1,000, $1,500 to bring in somebody, with expenses and hotels. But to bring in somebody like Robbie Green, it's about $5,000, $10,000. He's very expensive. He's very exclusive. He charges so much. It's probably because of his age. He's still preparing for retirement. I think that might be what it is. I'm kidding, by the way. I'm teasing all of you. Okay, now look, next week we begin the month of November, and man, am I excited about the month of November. We have so much to discuss. I'm not sure if we have that slide being able to go up so I can, no, we don't. So it's a mystery, but we do have, oh man, I should have had that slide ready for myself. There's a lot of good stuff coming up for the month of November. I'll just say that. We do have a lot of great speakers. We're talking about church revitalization. I'm really excited to hear about this. I know one of our great passions has been church revitalization. I know we're excited about hearing from Tommy Thompson on this issue, and many others who are really going into a ministry and turning it inside out, back to biblical worldview and back to a revivalistic mindset. So we're looking forward to church revitalization as our theme next month. And next month we have 5 different sessions. So we're going to be I'm looking forward to the second month. I know that one on the 9th specifically, that one's going to be a panel discussion with 5 church revitalizers. It's going to be a Q&A primarily, and we are looking forward to that. Hey guys, San Antonio is only a few months away. So make sure that you set up your time and your schedule, book that hotel. We're gonna have a great time in San Antonio. Remember, that is our members only event. We're going old school Idea Day, where there's really only gonna be about 50 of us in a room. Man, it is a totally different experience. If you've ever been to a summit, awesome. If you've been to an Idea Day with 150 people, fantastic. But if you've never been to one of these intimate events where there's just 40, 50 people, you're in for a treat. Bring your spouse, bring your best pal, and have a great time. San Antonio, that's coming up. You can register for that, I believe, right on the website. Is that right, Kylie? Register and pay right there. That's going to be a great event. If you have questions about that, contact Kylie, contact Courtney, contact myself, or contact Jeremy. Once again, we are so thankful for Kylie and Courtney and what Jeremy brings to the table as a shepherd of shepherds. We're really also thankful as we close out that Rob Redlin is finally showing back up to sit in his spot, because he even delegated this entire session to one of his staff people who's writing down the minutes and giving it to Rob later on. Thanks, guys. It's 12 o'clock, so we're out. We will see you next week.